What's up, everybody? So, Tau Codex are the latest codex out as of this ramble, with the Necron Codex being the latest codex up for pre-order as of this ramble. Drukhari and the Dark Elder are the last of the three for this triumvirate. It looks like we're getting releases of threes with codices, not at the same time, mind you, but it just seems like what you're getting is a showcase of codices to come in batches of three, which is just interesting. So the Imperial Knights should be the next of the three. Anyways, with that said, we have a pretty good preview strategy from GW that I want to ramble a bit about here, as well as a nice showcase of the chapter tactic effect in full effect. And I definitely want to talk about that because I like chapter tactic effects, things like the Sep World Tenets and the dynastic codes and all that. And a while ago, I think I mentioned the idea of the chapter tactic effect and how I liked it, and I still very much like it. I think it's being put to good use with the codices that have it. So I want to talk on that as well. With that said, the Tau Codex looks very cool, feels very refreshing for the whole separate tenant concept. Finally, the Tau have in place mechanisms to allow players to have their force feel different outside of their playstyle and color scheme, right? Because in editions prior, for a lot of forces, not just the Tau, basically anything that wasn't a specialized force codex like Grey Knights, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and stuff like that, for much more larger encompassing codices like the Tau, Necrons, and so forth, you had specific army-wide special rules, but you didn't have anything to differentiate, let's say, one Sep world from another outside of lore in the codex that you would then have to impart upon your force as you built it. So now you have that in place with the Sep tenets, and really that, plus the way they were showcased, just lends kind of a breath of fresh air for the Tau. And I think really further adds flavor to their whole setup, and that's really cool. Necrons being up for pre-order. I don't own the Tau Codex yet, by the way. I'll eventually get it, but I'm going to get the Necron Codex first as soon as I can, whenever it hits the local gaming store, or whenever there's a copy available at the local gaming store, I should say. But anyways, the Necron Codex preview was a further example of the preview strategy of GW and the chapter tactic effect being put to good use. I like the preview for the Necrons. It was definitely reinvigorating, and I look forward to seeing the Necron Codex come out and purchasing it and reading through it. I definitely feel like Necrons are in a better place than they were last edition, and they were in a fine place. It's just that now, again, with that inherent latent flavor imparted by, in their case, the dynastic codes, you have a more flavorful feel to whatever you collect, and I think that's cool. So with that said, preview strategy. We saw it with the Tau. We've even seen it beforehand, but the Tau, I think, really showcased it proper, and the Necron preview really helped reinforce it. And that is the preview strategy of GW. Of course, they're showcasing different Sep tenets, and they showcase different Sep tenets every day for the week of previews, the 5 days of previews. For the Tau, for the Necrons, do the same thing with dynastic codes, as well as showcasing some specific units and showcasing how things have changed from the index book to the respective codex. And that there being very obvious in our face, without having to wonder if they were, I think is part of their refining of their preview strategy, because we may have seen that in the past for some other codices. If we did, I feel it was either a lot more subtle, if not, intentionally subtle. It was just kind of almost more in passing than how it is very overtly displayed to us with the current previews that we've seen. The reason I like GW's preview strategy, how it sits now, is that it's showcasing the codex in a way to give you a glimpse of all aspects of it without spoiling everything, you could say, and without purely trying to appeal to new players. one of the things in a game like this, when you're showcasing a new edition of something, a new codex, whatever the case is that you could fall into what I consider to be the trap of purely trying to appeal to those brand new to that faction. Somebody who's never collected Necrons or Tau, for example, or a brand new player. Which is a bit on the easier side to do with previews and whatnot. It's not like it's a mean thing or a bad thing that's being done deliberately. It's just the case of how it tends to play out. So in showcasing the index here and there, whether it's a stat line, a rule, an entry, what have you, from the index and showing how it's changed in the codex itself is a nice step past that to also kind of help reinvigorate some hype for established collectors of a force. And I like seeing that. It just feels more like a complete preview, not just a shiny syndrome, check out this stuff. So I think their preview strategy is very well done. And really all I can say about it is, because, let me take a step back real quick. For a lot of what they show in the previews, if it's got, as long as the kit is for sale, so for example, when the Custodians were being previewed, they were showcasing some brand new units that didn't have their kit out yet because that was going to go up for pre-order when the Codex went up for pre-order. So they couldn't, it was just pictures of units. You couldn't do anything. When you clicked, it didn't really do anything, or you couldn't even click. But if the kit is already for sale, then what they have set up is, let's say a Necron Destroyer or what have you, you click on their picture of that model in the preview, it takes you to the product page for it. So it's savvy, it's intuitive, it makes sense. That's cool. But to have that in place and then have the index, the codex preview be so itty bitty tiny, like 8-point font or so on the website that you can't click to enlarge is a little silly to me. You can always hold down control and use your mouse wheel to zoom into the web page on a web browser on your computer. And I imagine with the mobile phone, the smartphones, you could zoom in with the phone. But it just seems like that should be something you should be able to click and expand. So if anybody happens to be watching that takes care of Warhammer community, that should be your next step for further polishing your previews. But other than that, I do enjoy their previews. So I think they're in a good place. And it's not like the previews for past editions or anything like that are bad. It's just that I think they got a nice formula down pat to showcase things. So with that said, chapter tactic effect. I believe I mentioned this a while ago in a ramble, but if I did, it bears repeating and talking more on. And if not, I meant to. And this is what I call what a lot of codices have been getting: dynastic codes, sept world tenets, high fleet adaptations, regimental doctrines, and so forth. It's in the Chaos Codex. We've seen it debuted with the Space Marine Codex, with it being chapter tactics, hence my terminology of chapter tactic effect. This is a really good thing. I think that a lot of it can be boiled down to army-wide special rules are great, but when you have a codex that encompasses a variety of forces, such as the Space Marine Codex, the Craft World Eldar Codex, the Necron dynasties in their codex, the Tau Septs in the Tau Codex, and so forth, having a system in place or something in place to just add a little flavor for some exemplary Septs, dynasties, what have you, goes a long way. Because beforehand, if you wanted to play VRLA Sept, you had to be the one to impart the aggression on your force. Maybe through army list building and then the playing of it. Now that's still the case, but having, let's say if you're collecting VRLA Sept and you have that as your Sept world tenet, then even before you put down your army list on paper, you already have that in your foundation of how you're building your list. So it makes it feel that much more like VRLA as opposed to feeling like Tau Sept or Daleth or what have you. So it's a very good thing to have. And Fifth ed, I believe, is when we first saw this stuff come into play with Space Marines, with chapter tactics. Not every codex makes use of this, however. The Dark Angels Codex, the Blood Angels Codex do not. The Thousand Suns Codex, and I believe the Death Guard Codex do not either, I think. I don't believe the Space Wolf Codex will either. And that's because, again, this is something, the chapter tactic effect is to represent a truly diverse collection of forces under one roof. The Unforgiven, the Dark Angels Codex, represents the Unforgiven just fine. The Blood Angels Codex represents all the Blood Angels' successors in themselves just fine. The Space Wolves are Space Wolves, so the Space Wolf Codex will be just fine, and so on. But multiple chapters in the regular Space Marine Codex justified chapter tactics, vastly different Ashram Militarum regiments justifies regimental doctrines, and so forth. Even the Tau, you may not realize how different some septs can feel to each other. They may be part of the Tau Empire, but they have different specialties, different tendencies from one septual force to another, so it's cool to have that in there. And what it does, as I already mentioned, it gives you inherent flavor differences. Now, while yes, it is very chapter tactic like, that's not a bad thing. I know there's some stuff on the interwebs every time a codex has this happen to it that people just kind of look at it almost as lazy. And I really don't view that to be the case, because it's not like we're looking at the same exact White Scars chapter tactic being put in place for another, highly immobile force for, Tau or Eldar or Necrons or whomever. There might be some similarities from one chapter tactic style to another thing like regimental doctrines or what have you. There might be some inherent similarities just in the nature of firepower, assaulting, maneuvering, or what have you. But the truth is that it's all done in the name of giving that extra inherent flavor, that extra layer to the cake that is the force that you're collecting. So I really think it's all done well. The Necron's dynastic codes I really like, because truly for the first time we're getting real, actual, inherent flavor for the different dynasties in the Necrons in the book, right? And for a lot of forces, we're getting actual different feeling forces represented by their chapter tactic effects without the need for special characters. That's really cool. When you think about Tyranids having high fleet adaptations, it's a really cool concept. It's just little things like that that help you inherently collect your force. The Harlequin Codex, when it comes out, is getting it, so that's pretty cool. Didn't expect it there. Seems like the Imperial Knights Codex may get it as well. So there's a lot of really neat potential therein. You just don't expect it for every force. I'm trying to think of the forces we have left, and I think most all of them will most likely have the chapter tactic effect happening to them. Outside of Death Watch, I think we're going to see it mostly happen to almost all the codices left. And then the codices that don't have it, it isn't a negative that they don't. It just wouldn't make sense based on the concept of those books, and I mentioned them already. So I really like the chapter tactic effect. For Tau, it really invigorated the Tau Codex a bit. For the Necrons, it really feels refreshing, and I think adds a layer of interest to the Codex that where it was kind of lacking a little bit, because as cool as they were, I could see very much why people might view them as a bit of a bland force, but now there's just inherent flavor there where it was lacking it. So I think that's only a good thing personally. Anyway, feel free to share your thoughts on both the preview, strategy, and chapter tactic effect type stuff, because why not? Always good to get the conversation going. And thanks very much for sticking through it. Any questions, comments, requests, leave them in the comment section. And until next time, take it easy.